In this video, I'm going to go over some more stuff from the View and Curves menus, and I'm going to be using Raymond's right-hand controller, which I've already put some animation on, and I have changed the color of the rotate channels to be a lighter version of how they started. So you can see that I have all my animation curves over here. I can see what they're doing relative to each other, except for this one, this Rotate Z channel. Has more extreme values on it, so in order to see what the curve is doing, I'd have to zoom out, and then I can see what's happening, but I can't see what's happening to any of these anymore at the same time, so I'd have to zoom back in. But if you want to see what all your curves are doing relative to each other at the same time, and make it more like a manageable visual relationship, then you can go to the View menu and normalize your curves by clicking on Display Normalize. And that just changed how the curves are displayed in the graph editor. It didn't actually change the value of anything. So if I select this key, which is on the Rotate Z channel, which used to be way up here, now that value is still 67.335. It's not actually 0.6 or so like it kind of looks like relative to these numbers. When your curves are normalized, these numbers are just the range that the curves can fall between. They stay between 1 and -1. So I can move the curves around, and you can see the values changing here. This is the actual value of the key. But if I bring it way up here, I can bring it above 1, and you can see the value still changing. I can bring it way up. And then when I let go, it snaps back to a visual value of 1. And then if I grab a different key on the same curve, and I pull that up and make that the highest, I can bring it above 1. But then when I let go, it's going to snap back down to 1, and then it pushes this one down relatively. And then if I grab this one, which is at the highest point, and I pull that down, then it's not at a maxed out value of 1 anymore. But if I go to View and say Renormalize, then it'll bump it back up to the extreme value of 1. So like that, and some other things adjusted relative to it. So that's normalizing and renormalizing. And then you can put your curves back to normal by clicking on this again to uncheck that box. When I do that, it puts the curves back to normal. And there are also these buttons to do the same things. This is Enable Normalized Curve Display, Disable Normalized Curve Display, and if I get rid of this channel box for a second, it'll make room for one more button, which is the Renormalize Curves button. And these two buttons are for Enable Stacked Curve Display and Disable Stacked Curve Display. So those are also available through the View menu. So well, the checkbox is enable and disable. So I'm going to stack the curves right now. So I'll click on stacked curves, and that changes the curve display in the graph editor. So now all the curves are stacked on top of each other in their own row, and they are normalized within their own row. So this rotate X can't go below this value. I can drag it down, but then it normalizes, so it can't actually go way down here into the translate Z row. So I can do that and adjust it, and it normalizes, same sort of principle. And it also shows you what the channel is over here on the right. So this says blah 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 right hand control rotate X, which is correct. I'm on the right hand control, it's the rotate X. So that is stacking curves, and to get out of stacked curves you can do it through the View menu or just click on this button. That puts it back to normal. And now I'm going to bring the channel box back and scrub through to here where Raymond's hand is in this position. And now I'm going to rotate his hand around about 360 degrees. And when I step between these two keys, it's in about the same position. But it's the in-betweens that can get wonky now, because I've added an extra 360 degrees to this curve rotation. So now between here and here, it's spinning around 360 degrees. And that actually can happen by accident. Sometimes if you're rotating from this axis relative to camera, sometimes it adds an extra 360 degrees or something like that. So if it does happen and you're upset by it and you want to get rid of the extra spin in the middle, then you can just go to the Curves menu and use the Euler filter. So if I click on that, it adjusts the curves, and all the values are the same. They're different in value, but the values create the same visual position of the controller, of the character. It just readjusted the key value to compensate and correct for that extra spin that you don't want. So now if I step between these keys, it's the same position as before, and the in-between is what you would expect. And now I'm going to go over simplifying curves, and I'm going to show what's on this layer. This is just a thing that allows me to easily select his finger controls. So I'll select his finger controls, zoom in on the curves, and now from here to here, there's animation on the rotate Y that's causing his fingers to bend. And if I wanted to just step between this frame and this frame, I can't go directly because it's when I'm stepping through, it's getting stuck on these keys in the middle, on the rotate Z. And these keys actually aren't even doing anything for me. They're all at 0, 0, 0, so nothing's actually changing with these curves, or with these keys. So if I want to get rid of those extra keys, I can go to Simplify Curve, option box, and I just leave these values set at 0, and then if I apply that, it got rid of all the redundant keys. So on the rotate Y, I'll undo, and all these keys were redundant because they weren't actually changing in value. They're all at 0, so they're not having any effect on the animation. Same with these keys and these keys. They weren't changing in value from here to here to here, so these aren't necessary. So now if I redo, you can see that it just got rid of all the extra keys that weren't changing the animation. So that's what I use Simplify Curve for. And you can also simplify it by just getting rid of some extra keys. So if I have a whole bunch of keys right here on this curve, then if I set this at 0.05 and 0.1, which was the default, and then I apply it, it gets rid of some of the extra keys, not all of them. It just kind of calculates which keys to get rid of to kind of maintain that flow. And the bigger this number is, the more keys it'll get rid of. Over more time, it'll drop out some more keys. So if it's a 0.1 and I apply it, it gets rid of some more keys, but still kind of tries to maintain that shape. So that's what you can do with the Simplify Curves. And a word of caution is it will actually affect your tangents. So if I adjusted those tangents like so, if I liked them like that, and then I applied this, then these keys are still there, but it affected the tangents. It set it back to my default, which is auto. So that can happen when you're using Simplify Curve, but pretty much all I use it for is just to get rid of the redundant keys. But those are some things you can do with it. And now I'm going to undo all of that because I want to get all my redundant keys back. And there they are. And another way to avoid getting stuck on keys that you don't want to get stuck on when you're keying through is to right-click on the time slider, then go to Display Key Ticks, and by default it's active. And with that setting, then all the keys that are on any of the channels for the selected controller show up on the time slider, and then that's what you stop on when you're clicking through. And if you choose from channel box, then only the keys that are on the selected channel in the channel box show up in the time slider. So right now there's nothing selected in the channel box, so no keys are showing up in the time slider. If I select Rotate Y in the channel box, then the Rotate Y channels are showing up, the Rotate Y keys are showing up in the time slider. So now I can click through from the Rotate Y to the Rotate Y, and I'm not getting stuck on the Rotate Z's. But if I click Rotate Z, then those show up in the time slider, and now I stop on the Rotate Z's. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to put it back to active though. And another way to do a very similar thing is to right-click on the channel box and then go to Sync Timeline Display. And then whichever channel you have selected here, same thing, those keys will show up in the time slider. So right now I have Rotate Z selected, so I'm getting stopped on the Rotate Z keys. If I go to Rotate Y, then the Rotate Z's go away, and I'm just going between the Y's. So that's how you can do that. It's pretty useful. And now I'm going to take that off, and thing right next to it though is Sync Graph Editor Display. So when that is selected, then whichever channel I have selected here shows up in the graph editor. So I have the Rotate Y channel selected here, and only the Rotate Y's are showing up. Then if I change to Rotate X, only the Rotate X show up, and if I select them all, they all show up. And now I'm going to take that off too. And the last thing I'm going to go over is isolating curves. So similarly, whichever I have selected here, I'll select the rotate Ys. And then if I isolate curves, then it isolates what I have selected here, the rotate Y, and then all the rotate Ys are showing up in the graph editor. And I can switch, and it's not affecting this like it was with the last thing I just showed. And if I have the X and the Z selected, then if I uncheck this box, then recheck it, then the X and the Z become selected, isolated, and those are the curves that show up down here now. And you can also select curves down here in the graph editor and isolate them. So whichever curves I have selected, then if I say isolate curve, those curves become the ones that are isolated. And it's kind of the same as just isolating them over here, selecting whichever one you want. But the advantage of using this is that you can select multiple curves at a time. So that's what that does. And that brings me to the end of the class. That's it. I hope you learned something. I hope you liked it. And thanks for watching.